I see a lot of people waiting for the perfect data to make decisions. And there's no scenario where you have perfect data, right? And that is where executives get paid for, to actually make informed decisions with the best data they have in hand at that time.
Today on Playbook Broken, we're talking to someone who doesn't just analyze data. He blows up dashboards and rebuilds the whole journey from scratch. Philip Armstrong is the SVP and go-to-market head of insights and analytics for Truth in Data. He's doing some terrific work here with me at SEMrush, where he's pioneering a new model, customer intelligence built around real behavior, not outdated metrics. He's also ex-Nike, which is cool. He led the global marketing science department. He's now on a mission to kill FOBO, fear of better options. I don't know what that is. We're going to talk about it. Ditch broken attribution models and expose how most data-driven organizations are anything but. Forget your dashboards. Philip is here to talk about activation, de-siloing, and building a customer journey that actually maps to how people buy now. Philip, welcome to Playbook Broken.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Excited about this.
Yeah, me too. You and I have had lots of conversations and finally got you on the show, which I'm excited about. Let's start with FOBO. I was reading your LinkedIn profile. I saw FOBO and I was like, I don't know what that is. I actually had to look it up. Where does this come from? Give me some background here.
Yeah, I didn't invent the term. It's a guy named Patrick McGinnis. He also coined like the fear of missing out. And he expanded that into fear of a better option or fear of a better offer. And that is the decision paralysis we face before we make a purchase or really any bigger life decision. And when we started out mapping out customer journeys, we saw this distinctive phase of that stage emerging in the conversion stage where you already have the product. The product is already in the cart, right? You want to buy this, right? But you want to make sure that this is a good decision, right? You're trying to rationalize the emotional decision. So you make sure, is it cheaper somewhere else? Can I get it faster here? Do I get more value out of that? And that results in distinct behaviors that we can see on the journey. And they're big enough and frequent enough to map them out consistently. So we borrowed this term now, which is in the public domain, FOBO, fear of a better offer.
I love it. So this is when I'm in a shopping cart, I'm ready to hit the button and I'm like, wait, I didn't check Retail Me Not. I didn't check AAA. Exactly. I didn't check ARP. Let me go see if I can find a discount. And of course, that both cognitive load and bad disconnected customer experience leads to probably poor conversion is my guess.
That's exactly right? So especially things that take you out of the experience, for example, a credit card, oftentimes you can go into a credit card account to activate certain vendors to get discounts for, right? But that takes you out of the journey and introduces all kinds of distractions. And who knows if you come back to this today or ever. So you want to reduce those FOBO moments. And the trick is there to really offer an incentive to understand what the FOBO is for your product and your category. And then counter that to an offer that you surface at that point in time that reduces the fear of a better offer, because you make such a compelling offer. You just say, hey, even if I get it for $2 cheaper over there, the extended warranty here brings it home for me, I buy it now.
That's so interesting. I have to imagine that has dramatic impact on things like attribution, conversion, as we said, and other experiential components as well, right? Like that really is, and everyone's doing it, right? Like the credit card offers is a good example. I find them to be enormously distracting, but I do use them.
Oh yeah. So this is interesting too. When we look at journeys, we classify them in a couple of ways. And one is like very common and emerging. And like a couple of years ago, people who look for discounts and discounts codes within journeys, those were price conscious segment, right? The buyer was price sensitive and did that across all the purchases. But now we see that it has become very common. So we classify that as a very common trait of a journey. People now always look for promotions and discounts, almost always. And the interesting part is they look at it at all parts of the customer journey, right? So in the past, what we've seen a lot is you're about to check out and it's like, hey, is there a discount code floating around for that, right? So you're at the very end of the journey. What we now see that people actually start the journey, right? They already limit their consideration set to those 5 products that they know they can get discounts on. And that changes the way that people and brands need to think about discounts. Because in the past, they always say, hey, this is a race to the bottom. We don't want to go there. you're not going to want that buyer, want to buy sales through discounts. But if you're unable to even get in the consideration set now, now have to rethink your strategy, how you communicate that.
Wow. I mean, the complexity of thinking about that and the cognitive load on a shopper is just like phenomenal, right? Getting anybody to buy anything. It's a real accomplishment at this point. Amazing. All right. So on Playbook Broken, what we do is we have different kind of segments, adventure kind of segments, breakdowns, new rules, war stories. I think today, given your background, let's focus on data. I think that'll get us rolling into a good conversation. So the setup here is, the old insights playbook, investing in a stack, hiring a couple of data scientists, building some dashboards, pushing that out regularly, daily, whatever, to executives. That playbook has been running for, 10, 15 years. What's broken about that? What still works and what's just got to go?
I mean, there are some things that always been broken, right? But nobody talks about it. So I kind of want to make sure that we separate that. So what's broken now because of AI and what has always been broken that's never been fixed, right? So the first things people do when they said, hey, we need to do more data-driven decision making, they throw money at the tech stack, right? And then nothing really changes because they very rarely have thought through the adoption process of this. Right. So when you think about from data signal to insights, right, there in itself, it's a bit of a journey. You capture the signal, right, and you massage the data, you get the insights of it, and then you need to surface the insight, right? It needs to come up somehow, right? That's a dashboard, a presentation, an email, whatever it is. But that's where most companies completely full stop. It's here now, and that's it. And for that, with that, you're not going to get anywhere, right? Because very few people will be inspired to truly take action based on like a dashboard or even a presentation. But you need to drive the adoption of the insight. And that is not something you can do very easily with AI or just like giving people more access to the dashboard. But you really have to create a team of champions who understand what are the salient insights and push them out to the organization. Because it is not how many people believe, yes, the data, and then they make data-driven decision, right? There's politics involved. You need to get people on side, convince people, like with any type of change. So in that scenario, the adoption usually never happens. And then you see things like at big companies that they invest in the tech stack and say they make data-driven decisions, but when you actually go into them, it's the same as always, right? So that's one thing that has always been broken and that people need to be very conscious about fix. And then the second part is now what happens with AI. And I'm sure if you want to get into this now or later.
We'll get. I want to back. I do want to get into the AI for sure because that is there are radical capabilities coming online and ways of thinking that go kind of further down into tactics at some level. But let's just back up for a minute. I was going to do this later, but let's do it now. At the highest level, if we back up, because you're talking about how do you take data, turn them into insights, and then make them actionable within an organization, given things like organizational silos, politics, decision-making, concerns about finance, whatever it is. There's a bunch of reasons. At the end of the day, there are different things, but I'll ask you kind of in a combined way, who owns customer journey and who owns go-to-market in the kinds of companies that at least you're working with today?
Customer journey is not something anybody owns. It is not, and that's what we encounter when we try to help companies here, because there isn't a set organization that has a set budget for it, right? There's always a search guy with a search budget and a social guy and the brand marketing guy and a paid media guy, all these guys. There is no journey guy. And the reason for that is because the journey by definition crosses all those segments. But these segments, as companies grow, they become more and more siloed. They create their own KPIs and they kind of shut themselves off in order to keep control of their own thing, but they lose all the synergies from looking at the cross. And then you have to go higher, like in global type insights function, CMO type levels who want to see, hey, how does this all connect, right? And then usually these people then kick it down and say, hey, you guys have to look at it. Right now, anybody feels responsibility for the journey the most. I wouldn't say it that way, right? They're not owning it, but they feel the most responsibility besides the overall big marketing function. usually the product guys, right? Because they're in charge of the product experience and driving traffic through that. And to a lesser degree, the marketing attribution people, right?
Yeah.
Because they're in charge of media mix measurement, modeling, multi-touch attribution, and they need to understand where all that comes from. And so they take an interest in that to sharpen their models from an data.
So like if no one owns it and everyone owns it, and if you can measure it, but you can't do anything about it. I mean, I think that sort of like for me, it encapsulates a lot of what I'm hearing in the marketplace, which is, confusion, concern, consternation, marketing budgets that are a little bit out of control or misunderstood, like the classic marketing sales, MQS, QL, like that exists still for the last 1 million years. It's probably worse than it ever was actually in it. So I think that starts to really paint a picture of how organizations are structured, how people are incented to their jobs. And that's disconnected necessarily from, the poor person who's like, I just want to buy a pair of sneakers and I don't know where to get the best deal. I don't know what the best brand is and all that stuff. It is in fact that kind of insane customer journey map that we talk about a lot.
That's right. It has become incredibly complex. Problem is there is no ownership. And the other problem is there is no perfect data, right? Because even of the stuff that we are now doing, like it's within data and it's SEMrush, it's limited to the digital sphere, right? Where people leave footprints and then digital signals. And that is by definition incomplete. However, it is never let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So
Yeah.
I see a lot of people waiting for the perfect data to make decisions. And there's no scenario where you have perfect data, right? And that is where executives get paid for, to actually make informed decisions with the best data they have in hand at that time. And as far as digital journeys come, that is the best data that's available right now, right?
Yeah.
Though it's incomplete, but it's the best journey data you have, and you can make tons of really impactful decisions based on that.
So let's now go the other direction. Let's get into AI, because I think AI, generative AI in particular, but machine learning, generally speaking, and other technologies that are coming online, give us the ability to both aggregate more data, look at data in different ways, and potentially make different decisions. It also presents the challenge of hallucinations and misinterpretation and all the rest of it. So connect the dots there for me, because as this playbook breaks and is rebuilt, we're now doing it in a world, 4 years ago, we didn't have powerful AI. Now we do.
Yeah, what breaks the playbook is actually then generated AI, right? So AI existed for a long time. Machine learning models and data science, that is classic AI, and they work beautifully, and there's issues. You have model drift and all of these things, but you know how to account for this, to measure and correct. But that allows you to basically like multivariable regressions on a scale that couldn't believe possible. It allows you to identify unknown unknowns, because what you do know, the known unknowns, I don't know what this is and how much that is, right? And the stuff but you don't know what you don't know. And AI and machine learning models are incredibly powerful to surface these things that you haven't even thought about, to formulate a hypothesis around, right? And then use that. So that was incredible. It's incredible. Still completely underutilized, right? People talking about utilizing AI, but then they think about how to do a chatbot, right? Instead of like, hey, have you really fully utilized the power of data science and machine learning? No, you have not. As we now come into generative AI, where obviously you have the issue of hallucination and all that stuff. But what is even more difficult is, when it comes to data, companies are very hesitant to put generative AI around their data, because they don't know the unknowns that are being surfaced and made visible to people who they don't want it to see. There's massive issues. Can see, or if you get just client access to data, they can freely query. They might find things they don't want them to think, which is fine. Do you remember when Google created a search for your hard drives? And that was about, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
vaguely.
And
yeah.
And you could download that like at any company. There wasn't any security around it and
Yeah,
install it.
they sold a device, didn't they? There was a physical device that went with it.
No, there was just a software.
Just software? Okay.
Yeah, and it indexed like the all data on all the network, and then you could just search for it, right? And you would find obviously things nobody thought you would be able to ever find just this folder structure. And that took about like 3 months before that product was completely discontinued and automatically uninstalled itself, right? So that visibility now you get similar visibility back with AI, right? Because it can analyze data so quickly and so thoroughly. So you have a bit of a risk there. And then the other part is AI is trained. Way that AI LLMs work, right? They basically work on averages, right? The mathematical relations of distance between words and whatnot, and then they take the averages of it. So because of that, what we see when you really use AI for data analysis, unless you really, really prompt it really well, it pulls out the averages, and average information is never interesting. It's mad, right? It's what you want to see is the things that happen on the edges. And AI, unless you really skillfully prompt it, does not get you there. So the danger of that is, to come back to answer your question finally, the danger of that is if you get like junior level analysts access to AI tools to go through the data, they're going to bring them answers back that are not good or not impactful and potentially even completely wrong, right? So I think that there's actually a really high risk that you make data-driven decisions on just really bad prompting of AI tools. When I do analysis, my son is actually at the American Military University studying data science, and he does analysis too. And him and I bonded on this, right? So when we do an interesting analysis on data, say, oh, this is a really interesting finding. Let's get the data back to AI and ask them what they find. They never find the stuff. They never find, right? Because they focus on the average, right? So then we try to refine it this prompting, and it's very difficult. So
right.
In the future, it will be amazing. It will democratize data access. It will democratize the understanding of data, right? Instead of doing complicated math, you could just ask, hey, is that statistically significant? Yes or no? You get it back. Right. But in the meantime, until it's really perfect, there's this gray area where you're going to get like really bad insights back and will make really bad decisions based on insights.
This vision that we've had for 20 years of kind of the one-to-one experience, right? The website, the company knows me so well that it's actually generating offers and engaging me in exactly how I want to be engaged, right? Like I like purple. So the website's all of a sudden purple, like at that level, right? But what you're saying, I think, is important in the context of data analytics and data science, which is if the path to that is, I'm just thinking about this for the first time, but if the path to that is through a generative LLM and it's like, there's no way to tune it properly for every single person. So it's going to be average, I think is kind of what you're saying. And so even though we have powerful technology to drive better customer experiences, we have to be very careful how we unleash it, which seems like an obvious statement because it's going to not be very good unless we're very, very careful. And maybe it's not even possible at that level yet. I mean, it's one of the questions I've asked different people on this show is, are we approaching finally the sort of true ability to do one-to-one marketing? Vendors like to say yes. Consultants like to say, I'm not so sure. What do you say?
Well, I mean, this also always been like the messaging. You know, there was an idea that with the most trackable media on the internet, that like every website is going to be customized, right? But processing load behind that, the data storage behind that makes it completely unfeasible, right? And now we see AI and we think about the ecological cost of that, right? And I see a lot of tools to just already, I click on something and they create some AI thing that I didn't even ask for or need, which is an ecological load. And now when you think you go on any website and everything is AI, what that does, what the impact of that is, that for me already is a problem. And the second part is exactly how you said, right? You take all those averages right? And that then makes it a mad experience, even though it's customized towards you. And then I also spent some time in user experience testing, and what we found there is a psychological aspect. People want, to a degree, not have the super customized experience, right? Because they want to know that they're in an environment that is in its native state, right? And then navigate it that way. And we saw that with the backlash on Facebook a couple of years ago when they changed the way that their feed, right? In the beginning, it was chronological, right? So everybody saw the same thing. And then it changed like based on their interests and whatnot, and who they thought what you should read, right? All of a sudden you wear an environment that is so squishy that it makes you uncomfortable, right? Because think about it, being in the room and the walls change depending on where you want to go, right? It's not like a human experience that people psychologically necessarily enjoy, right? So we gotta be careful how we use customization, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a trick because they're going to go all the way and over index on things that don't matter.
I think that's super insightful. I wonder generationally, is that what you're describing almost feels very evolutionary human, like our desire to sort of like not be in an overly customized situation because it gets creepy, it gets weird. There is an ecological load, all the rest of the stuff. Do you think newer generations, because they're growing up in this world of hyper personalization, might think differently, or do you just think there's something it's not going to scale?
There is something that's universal to it, right? Because you're not that long out of the woods speaking like that. But yeah, obviously, younger generations and they grew up with that stuff and they perceive it completely different, right? So, and I cannot assess that yet because also that AI customization hasn't fully happened yet, right? So, but once we have a generation that went through that, that would be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
But just thinking about the leading customization experience that you have, right? It's Amazon and Netflix, and wouldn't necessarily say it's easy to find something I want to watch on Netflix. Right. And that is a company that has best data scientists in the world, the most data in the world. And it knows what you watch, how long you watch, where you stop, where you pause, where you rewind, right? And still you open Netflix and they should play something and you should want to watch that, right? That should be possible. Is it? I haven't seen that. So there's limitations to actually.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot too. I mean, this happened to me the other day. I wanted to watch something and it didn't do a bad job. It's like, I'm looking at the Netflix thing and I'm thinking, yeah, these are all things I would want to watch, just not right now. I was in a weird mood. I don't know. Like I really actually ended up putting on something that was kind of brainless, just like it was like a reality show. Like, I don't remember what it was, but like, I don't want to watch any of this stuff. Now I bookmarked it all to go watch it later. Like, these look really cool. My brain right now can't. So the moment that the human interacts with the thing also matters, and we can't cover that.
Right. But that is not news. I did that 10 years ago. It's Sony, right? Because we looked at the consumption of streaming based on the sensory state, and which is basically what are you in the mood for, right? Because it depends on what you want to see. And what we saw very commonly is people just want to veg out. They don't want to make a decision. They want something that plays, right? And that distracts them. And they don't want to have the mental load of making a decision, right? And that's where it became full circle. We see that a lot with disruptive companies, and we can talk about that more, that they start out completely disruptive and then going completely back to where it started. And we see that with Netflix, they now are other streaming services that now modeling the traditional TV model where they have channels and stuff is playing, so you don't have to pick it. And, then they put ads back in. It's the same thing. So a lot of the disruptive company, whether that's Uber, Netflix, they always come back to full circle. And then, for example, Uber just recently invented the bus. Yeah, have you heard that? Like, you're like, okay, I never heard about like a car that is on a common route, does certain stops based on needs. It's a bus. It's a bus now, right? So invented the bus, but destroyed the whole other infrastructure around it. So.
Yeah, to reinvent the bus. Yeah, that is that's fascinating. What in the world of marketing attribution, customer journey measurement, all that stuff, like what are we pretending that works from a measurement standpoint, but it actually either never did or it just doesn't work at all?
Most things.
I'll tell you the one that I always beat the drum on, and I know, whatever, it isn't that controversial, but like email open rates as a measure of humans actually open email is just ridiculous. Once you know how open rates work, there's a little invisible pixel, there's corporate things that block it, and but yet we still persist on things like open rates and page views, and they don't really mean anything other than as a proxy for somebody to feel, I guess, good about something. I don't know.
And that's the thing. Somebody feels good about something, right? Because
Yeah.
if you look at this in theoretically isolation, that's all good. But in the real world, there's always a person responsible for it. Gets paid for it, has a manager, has a one-on-one. Next Friday is going to talk about something, right? And that person is want to send talk about something. If it's an email person, it's open rates. If it's the page person, it's going to be clicks, right? That sort of thing. And those metrics are often completely meaningless, right?
Yeah.
So in my functions and my marketing science function, where we actually developed engagement metrics around that are meaningful. And again, machine learning comes into play. You see what behaviors outsized contributes to certain outcomes, and you make that the KPI. However, most companies make any type of metric that they have easily access to their KPI, and especially email open rates, they can easily gain that sort of thing. So you get a better bonus, better, you have a number to present, but it's not actually meaningful. So a lot of these things don't work. What oftentimes doesn't work is marketing mix modeling. And there are a lot of companies out there that do that. They pitch you and they usually have some black box thing going there. And once you dive, so you usually don't get access to that, right? Because that's a proprietary source. Problem with that is you have no way to verify whether that it's okay, right? But you're supposed to do billion-dollar decisions based on that. And once you do get access, and in my position, like we got access to a number of those from the big names, and we opened that black box. There was stuff in there that was not impressive, and also had incorrect parts. It was stuff just wrong, right? And that's something you pay $1 million for. So it's very interesting. So I don't think you have to crack that. And, but at the end of the day, what you want to get at as a marketer is true incrementality, right? So what incremental do you bring in? Not just the sale that you now also take credit for, but that would have happened without you. And there are some good methodologies around assessing incrementality, and there's good experimentation around it too, right? Because it's kind of easy. You say, hey, I don't do Facebook marketing for a month. See what happens, right? Now you have your value for incrementality. It's very easy, right? So you kind of can separate those things out.
Yeah. A segue, and then we'll kind of wrap up here. Give me, if you can think of one, like what's a new rule that you'd write in 2025, 2026 for anyone trying to understand how people actually buy today?
It's the buying. I love about buying decisions. I like about behavioral economics and user experience design and all these things that come together. I think a rule that is not new for this year, but it needs to be renewed every year is you've got to look at individuals. And I learned that lesson when I did user experience testing for streaming services. And what happened there is when you interview like 3 or 4 people, you get 90% of the most significant changes that you need to do to your interface. And if you interview another 1,000 people, you get a long tail list of stuff that doesn't really matter almost the needle. The problem then always was like when I brought those insights back, which by the way led to innovations like picture-in-picture play, right? So you can do stuff on your phone while the video is playing, or sound off on video start for social media sites because people use it at work and they don't want to, everybody to hear that sounding off. You get pushback from people because they're used to those immense sample sizes from other types of research where they are necessary. Right. However, in that scenario, they're not necessary. And it's very difficult to get people to get that mind shift, right? They're like, hey, what's the statistical significance of that? How many thousands were those? Because they're really spoiled with like the search data and the representation data of each sample size. But again, the huge sample sizes, most of the time, they just create like uninteresting averages, right? And you really look into the edges, even with huge sample sizes. And especially when it comes to purchase decisions, you get more insights out of interviewing 3 or 4 people than looking at like massive data sets.
Sometimes, like you said, hard to sell that sometimes, because the first thing people say is, what's the end number? You didn't, I asked before and I didn't push it, but you did say that nobody, and one of the problems is nobody really owns customer experience or customer journey. Who owns go-to-market? Or who should own go-to-market?
I think go-to-market should be a strategy function in my mind, right? Because there's so many things that come together and that need to be executed, and that require kind of also allows you a long breath, right? And once you go down into the operational departments, whether it's search, social, they're always optimized like for next week and the next thing. And if they don't show like results within a couple of days, they're gonna get in trouble. Right. So for go-to-market stuff, you have to have a longer vision, a longer breath, a longer runway. And that usually comes with more senior functions and more global viewpoints of that, right? Than the specific person held responsible to increase the click-through rate from Google things on your side, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to develop a theory about this, and I think it depends on what the context of the question. It's not a super fair question. Go-to-market can mean a lot of things depending on the company, the size of the company. But at the end of the day, if you're into operational stuff and you're defining a sales motion as the go-to-market for the company, I think that's a little limiting. You can call it that, but I think it depends on how you scale it. All right. This show is called Playbook Broken for a reason. Every leader I know, every successful person I know, myself included for sure, has hit a wall where like the playbook, the thing just stopped working. Call this segment Forcing Yourself or Force Yourself. Tell me, Philip, a time in your career, personal, professional, whatever, Nike, SEMrush, anywhere else, where you had to force yourself to rethink an approach because something just stopped working. What I'm after here is kind of the inner game part. Like, how did you navigate? What did you tell yourself? How did you sort of navigate out of it? Was it just willpower? Did you use a process? Like, give me some insight into how Philip thinks about getting things done.
Yeah. So, I came like early in my career, very data driven, a background, always data analytics, that sort of thing. So I was very used to very, very data driven organizations, data first, and also people had a very good understanding of that. And even in the companies that I then went, I was usually in those digital functions, kind of spearheaded that. I think at Nike, there was a bit of that situation. Nike is obviously one of the most creative companies in the world, and they have that creative DNA, right? And what happens, and I have worked at creative companies before, but not as creative as Nike, right? Which is the biggest brand in the world, best at marketing. But the creative bone there really contradicts data-driven decision-making, right? And you encounter people that you built the business, you created the Android, and you show them a table of data and tell them to make a different decision than what their gut tells them. And they love it, right? And so in order to really position that, you had to go to the process. In the beginning, you say, "Oh man, they're so kind. I have until a generation shift. I'm building new leaders on there. I just need to be more forceful in the messaging, or like have different surfacing things. You kind of like iterate through that. I think that is how I did it. I just tried different things until I figure out what works. And then in hindsight, it seems obvious that was the thing you should have started with. But as in life, you don't really know until you look back. And in that scenario, it was very important not to tell them what the data stands, but really present the data as an additional opinion that now sits at your table, right? And so now you have access to another expert who can give you his or her perspective of things, and you can act on it or dismiss it based on the additional information that you have either in front of you or in your gut. When you're such a creative person, it doesn't feel right. Which if you drill it down, there's an iterative decision-making process in the brain that cut it down to. But in the end, they get to it quicker because they have creative bone. And so once you position then that, hey, here's another expert opinion for you to consider, right? That changed the game quite a bit, right? Then they took that more seriously and actually really used that in their decision making. It doesn't mean they always did what the data suggested to do, right? But also that's the whole point, right? If you have more information, different information, right? If you present to any given executive, they have so many information sources. They talk to the CEO, they talk to the competition, they talk to that guy, they talk to manufacturing, and they're not going to tell you that what's going on there. So they have more information. So you kind of have to accept their judgment because they just know more, right? And now that you give them additional information, they can make even better decisions and just reframe it that way. Instead of saying, here's what the data says you should.
Yeah, that's kind of brilliant, actually. I mean, having data at the table with you, just like an AI as another data point. But I think one of the conversations that's happening now, specifically about AI, and if you read like Rick Rubin and other truly creative thinkers, there is an element of taste. I mean, I think that's what you're talking about. Nike is incredible. They're an incredible marketing organization because they have incredible taste. The data may or may not inform it. I mean, Steve Jobs is famous for, saying things, whatever, and so that's fascinating. I love having data at the table as another point of opinion, but not necessarily the right or wrong opinion. It's just an opinion. That's amazing. That was great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Like every time you and I speak, I learned something. So it's just great. It's just great hanging out with you, talking to you. We hit a lot of stuff. FOBO, we talked about customer journey. We talked about the mindset, the mental mindset. We talked about AI. It's a great conversation. Can't wait to get in and edit it and get it published. Tell people where they can find you, what you're up to, how do they connect, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So my whole mission in life is to really bring data-driven decision making to companies in a way that works. Right? So really, as I said in the beginning, drives through to the adoption stage, not just like, here's another dashboard to look at. That's never worked. Right. You can find me at truthanddata.ai or on LinkedIn. I'm still at Armstrong, Truth and Data. Love to connect.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, man, this is great. Thanks everybody for watching Playbook Broken. You can find us on martech.org. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on all the audio channels, basically everywhere. We put the thing everywhere. Hopefully you watch it. Hopefully you'll like it. Hopefully you'll learn something. If you have feedback, if you have ideas, hit me on LinkedIn, find us on the web. Thank you so much for watching.